Hey everybody, welcome back to Go Read Some Comics with me, Professor Jenna. I know I'm a little late in uploading this video, but there was something else on Thursday that I kind of had to make a video about first. My Superman trailer breakdown is now live, and the response to it has been delightful so far, so please check it out and share your thoughts if you haven't already done so. I had stupidly gone into Thursday thinking that the adrenaline could get me to film and edit both videos in a single day, but by the time I got done with the Superman video, this is what my brain felt like. But now I've slept, and I've thought more about this excellent episode of Creature Commandos, so let's dive in. I was warned by multiple people. James even warned all of us at the New York Comic Con panel, but good lord, Weasel's backstory in episode 4 was so heavy. I had a feeling from the very first trailer that we would learn that Weasel was innocent, because he's the perfect kind of character to subvert our expectations with.
I have done nothing wrong, ever, in my life.
I know this. And I love you.
But the scope of it was still horrifying, and it is a really strong choice to make the law enforcement the true villains of the story. It's the kind of story that comics have told time and time again. It will definitely make my next rewatch of the Suicide Squad even sadder, which is honestly the perfect kind of superhero retcon. The fact that he then became more monstrous throughout that tenure to the point of that brutal fight with Cersei in last week's episode is all the more tragic to me. I also love how we still don't really know Weasel's origin story. Has he always been a Weasel-human hybrid? Did he get turned into one later in life? In the comics, he was created by Jerry Conway and Raphael in 1985's The Fury of Firestorm number 35, and he had a wildly different set of circumstances. This version of Weasel was known as John Monroe, a student at Stanford who is so unlikable that he's literally nicknamed Weasel by his classmates. He then gets a job teaching at Pittsburgh's Vandermeer University, where he immediately gets jealous of his fellow faculty and goes on a murder spree. When that faculty eventually includes Martin Stein, aka one half of Firestorm, a fight ensues. He then was thrown into Belle Rev, briefly joined the Suicide Squad, and died and was reborn during Blackest Night. The whole time he wasn't mutated at all, he was just a guy who committed crime in a weasel costume. So it's been fascinating to see James's approach be so different. My fiance and I have wondered for months if Cersei, who can turn people into animals in the comics, potentially transformed Weasel years ago and doesn't even remember it, but who knows if that'll actually be revealed in the remaining episodes. In the present day, I love seeing Linda Cardellini be in another one of James's projects, and especially with a character as unexpected as this. She plays Weasel's lawyer, Elizabeth Betty Bates, who actually has roots all the way back in DC's Golden Age. Created by Bob Powell in 1940's hit comics number 4, Betty is a district attorney who uses her unconventional methods to get justice, operating under the alias of Lady at Law. Betty Bates consistently had her own strip for over a decade, culminating in the final issue of hit comics in 1950. While that might sound like a quaint premise to you now, it probably felt like a novelty for readers at the time, given how few women were working in law. According to the American Bar Association, by 1951, a year after Betty's strip ended, only 3% of attorneys in the US were women. I admittedly haven't read any of Betty's comics yet, but I'm excited to dive into them now after discovering her in this episode. I will always be an evangelist for diving into the deepest parts of DC history to find a character to use instead of creating something new. There is absolutely no excuse not to when massive tomes like this exist. This is so heavy I can't even fit it into frame. After so many years of DC projects turning unrelated characters into lawyers or wasting the cool lawyer characters on run-of-the-mill civilian roles, it's just a nice touch to me. On that note, we also get Amazon expert Isla McPherson, voiced by Stephanie Beatriz. She was created by Brendan Fletcher, Becky Cloonan, and Carl Kerschel in 2014's Gotham Academy #1, a book that will always be extremely near and dear to my heart. It's a very soapy and scrappy story about teens at Gotham's weirdest prep school, and Isla serves as their history teacher. Her role is really to just be supporting and slightly suspicious when the kids are investigating stuff, which makes it all the more delightful to me that she gets reinterpreted in Creature Commandos. I love that we can pull inspiration from newer titles, something that the DCU is already doing in spades, without needing to build in this arbitrary waiting period, especially from a book as under the radar and beloved as Gotham Academy. Before she said her name, I was convinced that she might be Julia Capitelis, an archaeologist and biographer of Diana Princes who George Perez introduced in his Wonder Woman run. But the fact that it wasn't her makes me hopeful that we might see her down the line, either in Paradise Lost or in a Wonder Woman solo thing, and maybe her daughter too, who becomes the badass and super tragic anti-hero Silver Swan. Now, let's get to the flash forward, because oh my god. I'm almost glad that we had gotten snippets of this scene in existing trailers, because it would have almost been too much getting it all at once. I'll start with all of the dead heroes. There's Superman, Batman with a massive cape, and Wonder Woman in her classic trunks outfit. Two things that I really hope transfer over to live action in the DCU. We also have Peacemaker, Vigilante, Judo Master, and some heroes that we know are headed to the DCU. Hawkgirl, Supergirl, Robin, and Booster Gold. We also get my girl Starfire wearing what looks like a version of her Rebirth era costume. If we do get her in live action, maybe in the Teen Titans movie that is supposedly in development, I will be curious to see if that costume ultimately sticks. Even if it does, I do want her to have the iconic curly hair along with it, because the world deserves to see that. James actually told my friend and podcast co-host Brandon Davis, go listen to Phase Hero if you don't already, that...
Did you already consider these are sort of designs for future projects, or is this...
Some of them.
Okay.
Some of them. Some of them, yes. And some of them, you know, listen, we had to take an educated guess. We have a lot of steps to go through with some of the characters, and other of the characters we've kind of designed. So, so yeah, some of them are kind of an educated guess. I wouldn't take everything as, you know, if you see certain characters, I'm not going to take that every single one of them is going to look like that in their physical incarnations down the road. But it's you know, it's not far off.
And finally, the biggest surprise of the flash forward to me, Grodd. He's shown alongside the princess in a pretty perfect version of his comic armor. For the uninitiated, Gorilla Grodd was created by John Broome and Carmine Infantino in 1959's The Flash number 106. He's a giant gorilla who, after being exposed to an alien meteorite, gains telepathy and mind control abilities. He lives in and occasionally rules over the secret kingdom of Gorilla City, but has aspirations to conquer as much of the world as humanly possible. He has joined almost every villain group that you can possibly think of and fought a laundry list of superheroes, but he is mainly a villain and occasional ally of the Flash family. You probably know Grodd the best from his number of appearances in the Arrowverse, which honestly became a really well executed and very poignant arc for me, on top of having really great character design on a TV budget. It also produced one of the greatest shitposts.
Barack Obama.
I will admit, I never could have imagined setting up Grodd in the DCU this early. I didn't even mention this in my Superman video because I didn't want to spoil this episode for anybody, but the front page of the Daily Planet also shows Grodd with the headline, "Hammer of Baravia creates havoc downtown." I love the idea that Grodd is just out there conquering random countries, and I'm very curious to see how that factors into what we see of Baravia in the movie. Just getting teases of Grodd on a normal day would have been the only thing I would have talked about, but on Thursday it was so overwhelming that honestly I kind of disassociated about it a little bit, but I am so happy. Whether we get Grodd as sort of a big bad for the main universe, or just for the Flash corner of things, or we even just introduce Gorilla City in something like a Rogues adaptation. It's the kind of big, weird story that we haven't exactly seen in live-action superhero adaptations. And given how popular the Godzilla and Kong and Planet of the Apes movies continue to be, there would definitely be a draw for people who are dipping their toe back into the comic book movie space. I feel like the reaction to Crypto from the trailer already kind of proves that. It also definitely delivers on James's promise to put more apes in the DCU, so I'm happy. That brings us to the scene in the cafeteria. I already covered Kongorilla, Nosferatu, Chemo, Fisherman in previous videos, but there are just too many other weirdos to spot. The Wolfman serving the food could be Warren Griffith, aka Wolfpack. Created by J.M. DeMatteis and Pat Broderick in 1980's Weird War Tales number 93, he is a werewolf member of the Creature Commandos in the comics who was given his powers by Project M in a Captain America-esque World War II experiment. If this is him, I love paying tribute to the comic roster of the Creature Commandos without necessarily needing to put him in a major role. Ever since the trailer, I have wondered who this guy was, and it appears that the answer is Khalees. Originally created by Martin Pascoe and Walt Simonson in 1975's first issue special number 9, he is a reanimated mummy who arrives in the present day, fights Dr. Fate, and immediately dies. A more modern version of him, complete with the headdress that we can see in this episode, was introduced in the Frankenstein Agent of Shade run and fought alongside Eric, Nina, and Warren. In the back, sitting next to Chemo, is Egg Fu, who was created by Robert Kanigher and Ross Andru in 1965's Wonder Woman 157. He is a mad scientist shaped like a gigantic egg who largely travels around on robotic legs and lends his knowledge to various villain plots. Think MODOK, but without the butt. The mantle of Egg Fu has evolved a lot over the years and encompassed robots and evil twins and legacy incarnations of the character, which is good because his earliest appearances definitely have not aged well in the way of racial stereotypes. He is usually a Wonder Woman villain, but he's also fought the Metal Men and Checkmate. The amount of Metal Men characters we've gotten in this show definitely has the gears turning in my head. We can very, very briefly see Orca over the bride's shoulder. Created by Larry Hama and Scott McDaniel in 2000's Batman number 579, Orca is originally introduced as Grace Batlin, a marine biologist who experiments on herself with Orca DNA in order to repair her paralyzed body. Initially, she can transform back and forth between an Orca and a human, but Batman helps make the transformation permanent in order to save her life. Her most memorable appearance was probably in the Injustice comics, where she and Killer Croc got married in a very adorable wedding. A newer version of Orca, named Dean Toy, used his shape-shifting abilities to fight Atlantis in 2017's Aquaman run. And finally, we can clearly see Bug-Eyed Bandit, who was created by Gardner Fox and Gil Kane in 1966's The Atom number 26. As his name would suggest, he is really Bertram Larvin, a mad scientist who turns to petty crime to fund his efforts to control the insect world, which puts him in the crosshairs of the Atom. He died in the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but his son carried on his mantle in the 90s, joining the Secret Society of Supervillains. You probably know the mantle best from the Arrowverse's take on the character, which essentially amalgamated her with Queen Bee. Overall, this episode, combined with the Superman trailer, was an absolute fever dream. I hate knowing that we only have a few episodes left of this show, but I'm excited to see what other brilliance and what other comic connections we get from here. This universe already just feels so dense and so fleshed out, and we're only 80 minutes into it, which is just wild and beautiful. What did you think of episode 4 of Creature Commandos? Do you have a favorite Easter egg? Do you also agree that Weasel should be freed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Growing this channel has been so fun and so rewarding so far, and I'm not stopping anytime soon, so join the party. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.